My name is Dana Stimpson. Breathe. My father had an expression for just about any occasion. When he was feeling like time was going by way too fast, he'd draw on his Latin from his youth and say, "Tempus fugit, damn it." The damn it part wasn't really Latin. He had another expression he used pretty often when he was feeling kind of weary when he was doing a job outside, and he would be tired from it and he was taking a break, and he'd say, "I'll lay me down and bleed a while, then rise and fight again." This came from an old English ballad that he had memorized when he was younger. But one of the expressions he used often was just a statement that he had made up, which was, no matter how bad things are, going outside will always make it better. And that was always my experience as well. In every memory I have of my father, it's always outside. You know, we would do things together a lot, like walking through the woods. Later, when we took up skiing, we'd be chasing each other down a ski hill. After I went off to college and I would visit, he would take me on what I called tree tours. We'd walk through the yard and he'd tell me stories about all the trees and all his memories of these trees. And so that's the way I think of my father, always is outside. In his 90s, he developed tangles and plaques in his brain, and it started to rob him of some of the things that had always been so much a part of him. One of those was how vigorous he was on his feet. You know, he became quite unsteady. His vocabulary, which had always been really prodigious, started to fail him, and he had fewer and fewer words to try to express what it was that he was thinking about. But he always was able to come out with those little expressions. You know, he'd just repeat those. He said, "Tempus fugit, damn it," more often than I can count, you know, and more often as time went on. And it was always at the right moment. You know, he said them in the appropriate way. And he never lost his desire to go outside, ever. The last time we took a walk together, he was almost 95. It was just before his 95th birthday. And he was living in just north of Seattle, Washington. And we took a walk on a jetty out into Puget Sound. He walked about half a mile, almost 95 years old. He had his walker, and we could see Mount Baker off across Puget Sound. It's one of the volcanoes, snow-covered volcano north of Seattle. There were cormorants, and there were little children playing by the water. It's something that always delighted him. And then we went home, and then a couple weeks later, he couldn't stand. And about the same time, he stopped being able to swallow. And we realized that this was probably the beginning of the end. And I thought, "Tempus fugit, damn it." So we called and arranged for hospice, and we brought a hospital bed into his bedroom, and I moved in, and I was there for the duration. And it was at that point that I realized, you know, whether he had ever envisioned this or not, he had designed the perfect room for this occasion. It was windows all across that was to the west and to the south. And it was late November going on December, which is always rainy in Seattle. But now it was really cold, like below freezing, which is unusual, and bright sunny. And so he was able to look out into this yard that he had planted full of trees. He had said to me when he was 70 years old that it's a tremendous act of faith for a man of 70 to plant a tree. Mm-hmm. And now he was 95, and those trees were 40, 50 feet tall. And he was able to look out his bedroom window as he was dying and look out on this. My brother and I we have hummingbirds that are year-round in Seattle. and Anna's hummingbird. So we brought the hummingbird feeder around and hung it outside his window. And I had my back to the window because I was looking at my dad, but I'd see these shadows of hummingbirds going across his chest, you know, and it was just a beautiful moment. And so this is where he was. And so in our way, we brought the outside in. And I thought, yes, no matter how bad things are, going outside or bringing the outside in always makes them better. One other thing to say about my dad is that he's a real take charge kind of guy. He always was. And even in these last moments of his life, when he was conscious, he was directing me. And I think it was even more remarkable because he was in and out of consciousness, and he had mostly lost all of his language. And yet somewhere between his like a lot of times people say about people with Alzheimer's that they aren't themselves anymore. That was not my experience with my father. He was very much himself. He just was without language, you know, and so he was still a creative man. And so he managed with his gestures and the few words he had and our shared memories to communicate a few things to me that I remember well. He wanted to tell me how to take care of the birch grove he had planted years earlier. He wanted to tell me why the violets were planted down in the little ravine in the front of his yard. And he wanted to tell me, I want you to dig up one of those grand fir trees, take one of the seedlings and plant it in your own yard. All of this managed to come across to me. So this was a guy who could still direct things, even from that hospital bed. But I didn't come here to talk tonight about dying. I came to talk about the best outdoor adventure I ever had with my dad. And this was many years later in 1979. So here I was living in Vermont. My dad had recently retired. And he was going to do something he'd never done before. He came to visit me. So we had not had a lot of one-on-one time prior to this. And so to prepare for that occasion, I thought, I'm going to make arrangements for us to take a hike. We're going to hike up Camel's Hump. And so this was our plan. And so here were a few things I didn't know. Hikers often know about things called the 10 essentials. Things like take some extra clothing, have water, have matches, have a flashlight, have a map. I didn't know anything about any of that stuff at all. I had packed a sandwich. Actually, you know, I packed for this trip a sandwich and a bottle of lemonade. And I had made preparations by asking a friend how to get there. This was all my preparation. So he arrived on a Friday night and took me out to dinner, and we split a bottle of wine, and we laughed a lot, and we stayed up late, and that meant we slept late and got a late start. But that didn't matter because I knew where I was going. I was going right where my friend told me to go. So what did my friend tell me? He said, do you know where the teal farm is? Well, this is the way you kind of give directions in Vermont. You're familiar with certain landmarks. And I knew where the teal farm was. And he said, yeah, you go to the end of the teal farm road, and at the end there's a place where you can park, and a trail takes off from there. Takes you right up Camel's Hump. That's great. I've seen that parking lot. What I didn't know is, here's the teal farm, here's a road, and here's a road. And he was talking about that road, and I was aware of this road. So we got off to the wrong, on the wrong trail. So we went to the end of the road, we parked our car, we started up a trail, and being the take charge kind of guy he is, he was out in front. And we started up the trail, and we're talking, having a good time, and I'm just following his feet, not noticing that as we're going, the trail is becoming fainter and fainter. And at a certain point, I don't know, we've been in the woods 45 minutes, an hour, because I think we don't have a trail anymore. And I looked around him, and yeah, it was just woods. And the worst part was when I looked behind me, it was also just woods. We were just in the middle of the woods, and I was pretty scared. And I suggested we try to find our way back down. No, we're not going to do that. This is always my turn. We're not going to do that. Look, you've told me that the long trail runs north to south. We're headed east. If we just keep going up the hill, we'll run into the long trail. Don't worry about it. And I can see a ridge up there. So we start making our way. And the trees are getting thicker and thicker. Trees that I've later learned are red spruce that are really prickly. And now we're like kind of pushing our way through these trees toward this ridge and scratched. But we're still going uphill. I can't really see where I'm going, but I'm, and all of a sudden my dad just stops dead, right where he is. And it turns out there's a drop-off right in front of him that he hadn't seen. We have made it to the top of this ridge, but it wasn't the top of the mountain. It was just a place where a little cutout was. And I'm like, Dad, we've got to turn around and go down. No, we're not going to do that. We'll just follow it around and we'll come around past this gully and we will get to the top of the mountain. So we went on, and sure enough, we did. I will tell you, we did eventually get to the long trail, but not until we hit another one of those drop-offs and had to go around another one of these gullies and continued on. And of course, by the time that happened, we were so far into the woods, turning around wasn't even an option anymore. So we're still making our way through the scratchy trees, but things are loosening up a little bit, and I look at a tree beside me suddenly, and here's a place where a hatchet had taken a chunk out and somebody painted a red blaze into that little set. And I realized, because I had heard of these things before, that this was a trail marker. And I'm like, Dad, I think we're on a trail. I see a red blaze. And he said, yeah, I see one up here too. And oh boy, maybe we're on the long trail. And at that moment, off through the woods, I hear a voice, I'm on the long trail. A human, I was just so excited. Please stay there, we're lost. And this guy talked us through the woods until we made our way up to the long trail. He made sure we were okay, and he continued on his way. And now my dad and I are sitting on the long trail, laying ourselves down and bleeding a while before rising to fight again. Now, we can see to the north, and here is Camel's Hump. And I'm suggesting we go to Camel's Hump, where we will find a trail that will take us down. No, we're not going to do that. He thinks we should head south because that trail we had been on must have had an outlet on the long trail. So if we head south, we'll run into it and we'll be able to go back to our car. So we head south. Along the way, we hit a place where the trail, in order to continue, has to go over this metal ladder that's been bolted to the rock. There's another place where, I've forgotten my place. There's another place where we just had to stop because he got a Charlie horse in his leg. And we just had to sit while he rubbed his leg for about half an hour. And then eventually we came to the top of Burnt Rock Mountain, realizing the trail never made it up here. But now the sun was setting, so it was really pretty. So let's just sit down on the top of Burnt Rock Mountain and look out and watch the sunset over the Champlain Valley, which we did. And now it was pretty dark. We get up and we start moving south again, and we came to a shelter. Dad, the wise thing to do. Oh, by the way, I had already finished off my lemonade, and it didn't quench my thirst at all. It's just sticky in your mouth. But now we split our sandwich, and that was all the food we had. And here was a shelter. It was just a lean-to, but I thought, let's sit out the night. It's late September. It isn't wise to get lost in the woods anymore. No, we're not going to do that. We continue heading south. And in a very short distance, all of a sudden we see a sign. It says, road, 2.3 miles, and it's pointing to our left. Now, left means east, which means the opposite side of the mountains from where our car is, but we don't care because we're going to a road. And now it's dark, and we're just downhill, 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 over roots and rocks and, da, da, da. And it just seemed like it took forever. But sure enough, we come to a light shining through the trees. We made it to the road. Well, not really. What we found there was a cabin with a light on the outside of it. But we went up and knocked on the door, and this voice comes from inside, said, "You can't stay here!" Wait, help! We've been lost in the woods. We need some help. Can you get us to a phone? Do you have a phone? And this person inside just kept repeating that over and over again. You can't stay here. But eventually, by pleading with this person, we got him to come to the door. And what we found was a very old man. I have no idea how old, but later discovered that he had a 40-year-old grandson who was a professor at the university. So he was that old. And he saw what our predicament was, and he decided to put us in his car and drive us to the real road, which is another 5 miles away, which is where his grandson had a home and a phone. And there we finally had water and a place to sit down and warmth. The grandson was going out, but he let us go in and call a friend, and a friend came and drove over the mountains, picked us up and drove back over the mountains and took us to our car. And about midnight, we finally sat down in a restaurant and ordered a couple of burgers. And as we were eating our burgers, we started retelling all the adventures that we'd had that day. And that was actually the first time this story was told. And it's been told many times since. We've gotten a lot of mileage out of this story, both literally and figuratively, this failed attempt to go up Camel's Hump. And eventually we told it so many times that we could rattle it off, we could recite it, just the way my dad later recited all his life, had recited all these little expressions of his. It just came out. But it's a little harder telling it this time because every time I've told it before, he's always been there beside me. Like somebody sitting at the piano playing the bottom hand and I'm playing the top. I now tell it without him. But one truth that comes out to me as I retell the story yet again is that no matter how bad things are, it's always better if you do them outside. And Tempest, you did it down.